Hello and welcome to Mayodan Moravian Church. I am Pastor Leslie Cox, and we are just so excited that we are able to share with you our Moravian candle tea. You are going to learn some history, you're going to hear some music, learn how to bake cookies and make candles. So we are, again, just so excited that you are able to be with us. So I tell you what, let's just go on in. Come on.
Welcome to our sanctuary. We're having a little bit different kind of candle tea this year, but candle tea is a very important part of Moravian Christmas traditions, particularly in the south of the United States, because it was started here. It was started actually in Winston-Salem back in the 1920s. The Moravian women that put the first candle teas together did that specifically for the same reasons we do it today, which is to show people in the area our Christmas traditions, to remind other Moravians of our Christmas traditions, and just to celebrate Christmas in a very Moravian way. You'll see other things that we do at a candle tea to show our past and show some of our traditions, and we will talk about some of the different things that you may not realize are Moravian, such as the Moravian star, which you see in Walmart as an Advent star. It is a Moravian star, actually. The Christmas tree you'll see, the oldest Christmas tree mentioned in the country, despite what you see when you look it up on Google, is actually a Moravian Christmas tree in Spring Place, Georgia, which was a Cherokee mission at the time, and is about 30 years before the earliest mention of a Christmas tree that you'll find on the internet. Now, there are several other Moravian traditions that we'll talk about, but one of them I'm specifically going to talk about is the need to dress up. Moravians tend to dress up at Christmas. To be honest, I'm not completely sure why, but what we tend to do is put on everything from completely traditional, and I'll explain my costume in just a moment, to I have seen men in sweatpants rolled up to their knees and cowboy vests. Some people try. And I've also seen women dressed in the costumes wearing Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer blinking earrings. But that is tradition versus historical accuracy. I'm a little bit more historically accurate. You'll notice that I'm wearing black. I'll go back to the Cherokee again. The Cherokee actually refer to the Moravians as the black people. They don't mean the color of their skin, they mean the color of their clothing when they're at church, because Moravian men had specific black waistcoats, breeches, later trousers that they would wear to church. The women would wear a dress, and it became a very specific kind of dress. Instead of being pinned up like their everyday dresses, the Moravian church dress, actually came together and tied. Sometimes it had little hooks. It has to be fitted better. It's more dressy. You'll notice they're wearing white aprons. Why would you wear an apron to church? An apron is to catch all of the dirt and grease from cooking. The white apron symbolizes that she's not at work. She is showing her best for God. The ribbon colors, which show on both their halbas, their caps, and sometimes, but not always, on the front of their dress shows their choir color. Moravians used to divide up, well, kind of like we still do with Sunday school classes, where they were meeting together weekly, sometimes daily. The married men and women, the single men, the single women, the older boys and younger boys, ran out of fingers, the younger girls and older girls, and there was actually an infants choir. There were also choirs for widows and widowers. And for the women, their ribbon collar showed which choir they belonged to. If you were a widow, you wore a white ribbon. If you were married, you wore a blue ribbon. If you were not married, but old enough to be married, you wore a pink ribbon. If you were an older girl, a darker red ribbon, and a younger girl, a bright cherry red ribbon. To be honest, I'm not sure what the color for the infants were. But, and by the way, both boys and girls would be wearing the caps, the gowns, and the ribbon if you were an infant. That is the way that Moravians tended to dress for church at the time. Their everyday clothes were almost identical to everybody else's at the time. Just look up old pictures of George Washington. That's the way Moravian men dressed at work. Now, the pictures that I've brought show two Moravian women from the 1700s, and these pictures can give you an idea of what I meant by the ribbon colors. This is actually an older girl. She's not old enough to be married yet. You can tell by her ribbon and her dress, her white apron, and her haba or cap. And the same thing with this sister. It's a little bit different, but still, she's got her ribbon, she's got her dress, she's got her haba.
Hi, I'm going to tell you about our Advent wreath. Our Advent wreath is made in a circle. It means no beginning and no end, just like God's love for us has no beginning, no end. It's constant. We have the candles here. I've already lit them. They are, the first candle is the candle of love. It shows Jesus being born and the cross. The second candle is the coming. When Jesus came, there's a horn on here to symbolize the announcement of Jesus' birth. The third candle is our candle of peace. It is symbolized with a dove, as dove stands for peace. The fourth candle is the candle for joy. And we have a lot of joy at Christmas. We have a lot of fun at Christmas. But for us and Moravians, our church means a lot to us to come and celebrate Christmas. We have, for the fourth one, is the Bible, which is God's Word. And God's Word is what we follow. And we have other symbols up here, the angel, where the angel announced the birth of Christ. And we add greenery and anything that means something special to us. I know somebody today has a pin on that's our star. I would love to add that to the Advent wreath because that means a lot to me. This is the star that was mentioned earlier in the history. The star has many points. This is what we call the Moravian star. You see them in stores called Advent stars or holiday stars. This star was created in Germany by a student. A teacher gave the students a project to do, and it was to make a star. So when all the stars were brought in, a young man brought in a star like this, and it's pointing in every direction. And we, since then, we have used this star as our symbol of Christmas, of love, of hope, and of joy.
Good morning, boys and girls. It's so good to have you with us this morning. I want to talk to you just a little bit about our archives. And my name is Imogen Cook, and I've been in this church for a long, long time. I won't even tell you how many years, but it's too many. But let's talk about our archives. I bet you know what an archive is, don't you? Well, anyway, it is where we store some of our memories, and we have all of these things that mean something to us, and it's something we want to remember. On the top up here, we have some offering plates and some coffee cups, and you can see they're really old, but you can't know how old they are. Our church was built in 1896. You know how many years that is? Sure, you're right, 124 years. So when our church was built, the people in the church put this box in a big cement slab here and put it out in the cornerstone of the church so that it could be opened later for somebody to know what was going on when the church was built. And in that box, they put archives of the hymnals. They even put a letter from the bishop in Winston-Salem, and his name was Howard Ronthaler, hard to say. But he wrote this letter July the 6th, 1896. And we opened the box in 1996, and we saw all these things that the people used back in those days. Now, all these things in here on that second row, that's just hymnals and coffee cups and bulletins and songbooks and things that we used. And you see in the middle of the third row here, that is our motto. Can you read it? I can't read that. That is in Latin. But if you could see this one here, it's written in English, and it says, "Our Lamb has conquered. Let us follow him." Now we have here a chalice. I don't know if you can see it. Let's see. Over here we have the chalice that was for our communion. You know what communion is, don't you, boys and girls? That's when you take your communion in your church whenever the service is right. And that's when you take the cup and the bread in Jesus' name. And in those days, we didn't have these little cups. We had one cup and everybody drank out of it. But you know what? There was not all these germs that we have today. So the urn and the chalice and the cup up here is what we used in those days. Now we use the little cups, so everybody has one on their own. Now we also have our organ here. This we didn't get until 1936. In 1936, a couple of ladies decided that we needed something besides the horns and whatever. And so they purchased this organ, and you see, it doesn't even have any electricity. You have to pump it all by yourself. Bet the organist was tired after service, don't you? Okay, we had a band, and we still have a band on Easter. Also, a musical instrument down here that they played in the band back in those days. You see, it's so different from what you have today. And guess what the big copper pot is? You'll never guess. That's what we made coffee in a long time ago for our love feast. Have you heard about our love feast? That's when we all gather as a family, a church family, and have a simple feast together. And that is coffee, and that's why the little stained cups up here. It's coffee and sugar cake. And that's what we always have. We still do this at all our special ceremonies. We do that. And we have some urns, and we also down here have the first pulpit Bibles. And these Bibles were printed by the American Institute in 1895. So they're really, really old, and we can't do anything with them because they'll come apart if we do. Now, as we go through and opened up the box, we see that all these things mean so much to us because we have figured out that those things are what the history that it made possible for us. And I'm so glad you were here, and please come back and visit us again. Thank you.
Hello there. We're happy to have you here today. We are making candles for the Mayodan Moravian Church. We do this every year and have been doing it for a long, long time. I've been a member of this church just about all my life, and my parents and the relatives were members, and this is one way that we feel that we can spread the gospel by using our candles. And we start in February making candles and have them ready for Christmas so that we can use them as decorations. If you notice, there's candles of different kinds around the room, and then we use them at our Christmas Eve love feast. And we are going to show you some things about how we make candles. In talking to the school children, we always tell them about all the ingredients and how we thread up a mold. And a mold gives the candle its shape. And we make several different kinds of candles, several different sizes. This is the mold that we use for the candles on the Christmas tree. We call them a birthday candle, but that's the smallest one we make. Then this is the one that we make the most of, and it's the mold for the love feast candles. And then the other size is the big one. This is the biggest candle we make, and it's used in decorations like the ones that you see in the windows there. And so you have to have the mold, and in order for a candle to work, it has to have a wick, and the wick has to be made out of cotton, a cotton string, and this is cotton twine, like people years ago used to use at a tobacco, to tie tobacco on those sticks. And one time we accidentally got some that had some nylon in it, and boy, that was a surprise when we had the love feast, because when the ladies lit the candles, they started sparkling. So we were very careful to make sure we have cotton string. And we have to cut the string in different sizes to fit the different molds. This is one for a love feast size. And then you have to take this cotton string and string it up. My name is Bonnie Conley. This is our daughter, Laura Springs, that has been making candles since she was a little girl, because she used to make them with my mother at home after school. And she is stringing up a mold. You have to take the wick and fold it in half, and then you take this little rod that has a loop on the end of it, little hook on it, little hook, and you stick it in the mold and catch that little loop at the top of the string and pull it through till it comes out the top end, and that's what she's doing now. And when you get one through every hole in the mold, then you put a rod through it, and that's what she's getting ready to do now. These molds make 12 candles, and you have to have 12 strings, and you have to have 2 rods, and these are the rods that are used to hold the string. And when I'm talking to the children, they see how that if you don't put that rod in there, the string will fall out. And so you put the rod in on one end, and then you turn it over, and to keep it from falling out again, you use a little piece of putty, sort of like clay, but it doesn't get hard, and you put that on the other end, and that's what keeps the candle from falling out. You got the putty down the line here, you got the strings in, you've got the rods in, and then you're ready to pour the wax. Well, wax, there's different kinds of wax, and the wax that we use is beeswax, and it's mixed with beef tallow. Now, I always ask the children, where do you get beeswax? And with second graders, it's always exciting to hear what they tell me about where you can get beeswax. There's always some that know that it comes, it's made by the bees, and it comes from the hive, but you'll always get one remark somewhere along that the little child looks very serious and then says, "From your ears?" So we say, no, we don't, this be hard to get enough to make it from your ears. So you take the wax and we put it in a coffee pot and it melts. And when it's melted, not too hot, because if it gets too hot, it will turn dark and it will sometimes run out. And then you pour it very carefully in the mold. And so I'm going to pour this mold, and as you do it, some drips out, but you fill up the mold, make sure all 12 of these little holes are full of wax. Okay. I'm going to fill this one too. Making sure all 12 are full. And then what you have to do is let them set in a cool place, and it takes about a half an hour. And then they're ready to come. You take those little pieces of putty off of the bottom, cut the strings, and we run hot water over it to get them loose from the mold, and we're ready to take them out. And we pull them up, and we have our beautiful beeswax candles. And so the next thing that we do is take them off of the bottom here. We take this rod out, cut the strings, just cut these strings loose and take that rod out. And then we pull the candles loose, and these are going to fall out, which is good. Pull them all loose from the block. And then when we've got them all loose, they've still got some work to be done on them. We've got to make this candle end smooth, and we've got to make our wick the right length. So we take a razor blade, or when we're doing a lot, we take something called a beekeeper's knife and cut all these ends. So I'm just going to cut off that end right there, where it's smooth, And then sometimes I use scissors and cut this. I've got a razor blade. I'm going to cut it with a razor blade. And then twist our wick. Put a little wax on it, that helps. And then there's our finished candle, ready to be dressed with the red frill paper that we put on the bottom. If you look at our Christmas tree, I'm going to step right here and get a candle. This candle is dressed in its red paper skirt. And the reason for the paper is two different things. One is the beauty of it. It makes a beautiful candle to have the red paper at the bottom. And it also protects your fingers from the wax melting. And in the church, we think about the candle with its red paper as something else, because the beeswax is so pure, it reminds us of Jesus Christ. And the red paper reminds us of the blood that Jesus shed for us. And the flame at the top reminds us that He is the light of the world. So our Christmas tree is like an old-fashioned Christmas tree that people would have had years and years ago, decorated with things that they made, things in nature. This one we use popcorn and cranberries to decorate it with our star at the top. And I always like to tell the children, we put up Christmas trees. Some people put them up before Thanksgiving, but then they didn't put them up usually till about Christmas Eve, and they didn't light them until they were ready to celebrate, because you couldn't leave the candles burning. It might catch the tree on fire. So the Christmas tree doesn't have to have electric lights and all the fancy things. You can find things and make things for your Christmas tree. So I think that is, you can see pretty well what goes into making the Christmas candles and how they are used. Thank you.
Welcome to my Moravian kitchen. I'm making something called Moravian Christmas cakes, but they're not really cakes, they're cookies. And this is what they look like when they've been baked. The secret to these cookies is rolling them so thin that you can see the cloth-covered board through the cookie. And of course, this is what they look like before they're baked. I know a lot of the children look at the dough, and this is what it looks like after it's been mixed, and they think that it's chocolate in it, but it's not chocolate. It's molasses that gives it that dark color, along with dark brown sugar and 5 different kinds of spices. You mix this up, let it set for 24 hours, and then you're ready to roll. And back in the 1800s, they would have something called Cookie Baking Day. And the boys and girls were allowed to stay home from school and help their mother and aunts and grandmothers bake cookies. And at the end of the day, they would have a tin like this full of cookies. This is an old recipe that was brought across from Germany with the early Moravians. We here at Mayodan have been doing this for a number of years, and we have got so many cookie cutters too. We bake these at 300 degrees for about 10 minutes, and after that, you're ready to eat.
Good morning. I'm Sue Moore, and I'm a member of the Mayodan Moravian Church, and today we're in the Putz room. The word Putz comes from Germany, and it means little decorations. And then the Moravians came from the Czech Republic and from Germany, and they came to America through Pennsylvania, and then traveled the wagon trail down to North Carolina. As they came into North Carolina, they were given a piece of tract of land in Winston-Salem. And today we're going to talk about Christmas, and we're going to talk about the Christmas in Germany, the Christmas, that first Christmas in Bethlehem, and then we will be traveling on to Winston-Salem to around 1700s, and then into Mayodan of the 1890s and into the 1900s. The first scene that we'd like to look at is the Moravian Star. And the Moravian Star, this particular one, was made by 3 women here at Mayodan Moravian Church. And it was made out of paper, and most of the Moravian stars are made out of paper if they're at homes, but they're also made out of plaster, and you will see them all over the world. But the first one was made in a geometry class in the Czech Republic by a 10th grade student. He was given the challenge, as well as the rest of his class, to come up with a project. And he came up with this idea of a star. And the star was made out of paper, and he was using his mathematical skills, and he came up with a smaller star than this, and it became so popular in the village that people came to see it and wanted him to make one for them. He began making them for a lot of different people, and then, as you can tell, that story spread all over the world. And today you will see them here in Mayodan downtown. You'll see them in Winston-Salem and lots of different places, even in Africa, where a lot of Moravians live today. But this is a Moravian star that goes way back in our congregation. Today we use the plastic one in our church because it's better for long time use, okay? This is the Moravian star, and this one is made from paper. The first Putz we'd like to look at is this one. This Putz is the one that is traditionally used in Germany, and it was used under the Christmas tree. And it's the scene of the first Christmas. And this is seen right outside of the foothills of Bethlehem. The hills were primarily used to tend sheep. There were no fences. They gathered the rocks that they had and kept the sheep. The sheep are known basically for being not as the smartest animal. They often wandered and went astray. The shepherds had to take turns staying up at night. And this particular night, they were very amazed about one thing, and it was the star. The star had been prophesied long before that there would be a Christ child that would be born. And on that night, not only were they guarding their sheep, up on the hill, they see an angel. And the angel tells them that they need to go to Bethlehem. The Christ child has been born. And the irony of this story is the shepherds were the least likely people. You would have thought important people would have been told the story of Christ, but they weren't. It was the shepherds, and they were tending their sheep. So the shepherds were the first to arrive in Bethlehem. They leave the hillside and travel to the next scene. This is a scene of Bethlehem. Now, Bethlehem does not look like the typical Christmas Eve in America with snow, but this is Bethlehem as it looks in some parts still today. Parts of Bethlehem are modern, but this is the night that the Christ child was born. Again, we see the star, and the angel is there, and we see the shepherds have arrived. They arrived to a town that is being very busy. There are lots of people coming into Bethlehem to pay their taxes. There's always one entrance into Bethlehem, and that's this one. Today, there's still one entrance that goes into the older part of Bethlehem. The town has flat roofs. They were made out of wet mud. It was damp when they got it, and the people in Bethlehem made it, and they were flat tops so that the water would come off the hill and the tops of the roof and collect. Roofs were also used because of the heat. It was so hot in Bethlehem that most of the people slept on top. That particular night, there's a couple called Mary and Joseph who've come to pay their taxes. When they arrive, the city is packed. There's no place for them to stay. They are told that the only place available is at the place or the stable where the sheep and the cattle are being kept. Mary and Joseph arrive, stay here, and the birth of Jesus is that night. As the shepherds come, they're excited. They come see the Christ child, and they're wanting to tell others. It is several weeks later before the next group comes, which is the wise men. There are 3 wise men. They bring gold, incense, and myrrh. And they are amazed, and they have followed the star. They had heard of this star that was going to happen and that the Christ child was there. So there's Mary and Joseph and the Christ child, and this is a scene of Bethlehem. The next scene is almost 1600 years later, and it is Winston-Salem, North Carolina. The town is not called Winston-Salem. The town is called Salem. It is a tract of land that is given to them, and Salem means peace. These people have arrived from Pennsylvania. They bring their own skills. They bring their music. They bring their gifts of knowing how to do tin. They know how to garden. They know how to teach music. They are also educators. There's a brother's house where the young men are taught skills and are well educated. One of the interesting things about the Moravians is also that they build the first college for women and prep school. It is today called Salem College. It is the oldest women's college in the United States, and it's still in existence. When they build their church. The Moravian Church is the oldest mission church in the world and the oldest Protestant church in the world. They have everything they need. They have a square, and the Moravians are the first to celebrate the 4th of July. And they bring their music and their talents from Europe to Pennsylvania, and they bring it here to Old Salem. And today it's still celebrated. And these are houses. If you tour Old Salem, you would see these buildings. There's the bakery, the tavern. The tavern is where people ate, and the lodging was here. It is recorded that George Washington came to Salem and visited and stayed at the tavern. This is Old Salem, probably around 1770s. The next picture we're going to look at is Mayodan. This is the village of Mayodan around 1896. What brings us here are a group of men that are building a railroad track from Winston-Salem to Roanoke, Virginia, which later becomes Norfolk and Western. Along with them come several men who are Moravians. One in particular is a Moravian minister called Howard Ronthaler. Howard Ronthaler later becomes a bishop of the Moravian Church, but he's also a surveyor and a graduate of University of North Carolina in geography and geology. As they come through here to build a railroad track, they're amazed at the land, they're impressed by the land, and they go back to Winston-Salem and tell them about this beautiful place that has rivers, hills, and valleys. The only place while they're building the railroad track is an old log house. Later, a man by the name of S.P. Tesh comes from Winston-Salem, who's a member of the Moravian Church, and he builds a store, a mercantile store. The mercantile store stands where Eddie's Exxon stands today. He carried all the supplies that were needed. The first thing the Moravians want to do is to build a church. They build the church, start building it in 1895. It is completed in 1896. It is a church, and the wing to the back is not only a church, but it is a first school in Mayodan and the first library. The books were brought from Winston-Salem. They had a Christian education director, and they had a school. So the Moravians were known worldwide for their education of both men and women, and for the reading and the books and their music. Later in 1895, the people in Winston-Salem hear about this is a great place to build a cotton mill. Cotton mills are being built up and down the south, and especially along rivers, and they build Washington Mills. Washington Mills is coming out of Winston-Salem. This was built, all the puts were built by Agnes Carlton, who was a member of our church in the 1960s. This building, the Washington Mills, is built to scale. It's made of balsa wood, and the windows are built to scale. This room is the boiler room. This room is the power room, and this is the machine shop. People from all over the country come because they hear of this mill, which is one of the most modern mills of its time. My grandfather came from Raleigh, North Carolina, to come to work at this mill, and that's what brought us here. This is a well. They have to build their well. They have a mercantile store. The next people to come, one of the first families, is Dr. and Mrs. Alt. Their parents are originally from England. For some reason, they get down in this area. Dr. Alt is not only a pharmacist, he is a veterinarian. He takes care of the people. He fixes prescriptions, he fixes drinks called whatchamacallit and what if, and he takes care of not only the people, but their animals, which were very important. During this time, people are traveling up and down this road to go to Roanoke from Winston. It has been documented that Thomas Edison, Henry Ford, and Harvey Firestone stop where the well is to put water in the Model T. They later people have been told that they stayed, there were no hotels or motels, they stayed camped out along the Mayo, which was very typical for these three men to do. It's been documented that oftentimes when traveling from Florida, where Edison lived, that's their style, was to camp out and sleep wherever there was. They were particularly intrigued by some of the mountains and the water and the beauty of this area. So this is made in 1896. This is the Mayo River, which gives the hydro power for this mill, which takes cotton from the south and makes a finished product. They made t-shirts, underwear, and pajamas, and lots of different things like that. The plant was in existence till the late 1970s when it was closed. But this is made in 1896. The next one is a rural, this would be considered more inside of town. The next put would be over here. This puts is typical of rural, right outside of the town. Again, Mrs. Carlton made this scene. It's pretty much typical of a farmhouse. The farmhouse, if you notice, has a big porch. It has a wooden plank floor. There was no cement. They were always building along creeks or rivers for purposes of water, fish. They also had picnic tables often outside. People often ask, why did they have picnic tables? It was hot. There was no air conditioning. They also had a place here, was probably where they worked on things. They had outdoor plumbing, which the children are always intrigued with. They cut wood. They kept their sheep for the wool. They had pigs to feed for bacon and sausage. They had a covered bridge. There were 3 known covered bridges in this area, and one was here close by in Mayodan coming in. The river gave access to and from. Here's another farmhouse, maybe a little different. They were often white, steep roofs. And then oftentimes, especially in North Carolina, the barn may have been built first to house their horses and whatever they needed for transportation. There were no cars, so it was very important that the animals were taken care of. The children always ask, what is this man doing? He has a lantern in his hand. Electricity was not available. It was all by light and gasoline lights. It's also important to know that they always cooked a lot of times outside, or the kitchen may have been attached from the home because in case of fire. But this is rural North Carolina, very typical of what people would have seen at that time. Again, this was made by Mrs. Carlton. This one, the one here of Mayodan, and the one of the nativity scene.
Thank you for joining us for our Moravian Candle Tea. It has been our joy to share this special experience with the elementary schools of Western Rockingham County since 1963 as a field trip. However, as a result of COVID-19 restrictions, Mayodan Moravian Church decided to share our traditions and history with a larger community through this video production. We hope you've enjoyed your time with us as much as we've enjoyed it with you. We wish special blessings on you and your loved ones this Christmas season. Merry Christmas from all of us at Mayodan Moravian Church.